here with the Lady Luna. Welcome back to this, my very own little creative corner of the internet. And a huge thank you to each and every one of you for your love and support for this little channel. Now my friends, if you've been with me here on the Evelyn Adore channel for any length of time, you'll know that one thing I'm incredibly passionate about as a disabled creator and sewist is accessibility. So this week I wanted to share with you my top tips on how I make sewing more easy and accessible for me. So without further ado, I'm going to share with you my top tips and some ideas that you may not yet have thought of. Let's check out those top tips. Well, Luna has a snooze. Of course, it's a day with a Y in it. First up, my friends, I like to think about the area in which I'm going to be doing my creating. I like to make sure that the temperature is just how I like it and that it's lit just as I like it as well. I am incredibly sensitive to temperature changes because I have a really difficult homeostasis system. My body just cannot regulate its temperature, and I'm also incredibly light sensitive. So making sure that the environment that I am creating in is just as I like it can make creating a much more enjoyable experience. It can also prevent quite a few triggers and stresses as well. So that might be one thing to think about, my friends. Make sure that the place that you are doing your creating in is nice and comfy and cozy for you and your needs. Get to know all about those different fabrics, my friends. Learn about them, their properties and their uses, and most importantly, which fabrics do you like? Which fabrics do you like working with? And most importantly of all, which fabrics do you like wearing against your skin? So important. Get to touching and feeling those fabrics, find out which ones you like and which ones you don't, and stick to the ones you like, because most importantly, I'm going to sound like a real broken record today, my friends, but most importantly, you need to enjoy what you're creating and making. So yes, okay, make what you need to make for your wardrobe, but also make what you want and what you fancy making. Most definitely, that's very important. Make sure, my friends, that you are maintaining your sewing tools, including your sewing machines, and I have a video on doing just that. I'll pop a card above. Be certain, my friends, that all your pins and needles are staying sharp, and dispose of the ones that are getting dull. Your fabric and your projects will most definitely thank you. And on the subjects of pins and needles, my friends, have a variety of these in different sizes and fabric types, because this will make your projects and your sewing much simpler, especially concerning hand stitching, because for me personally, my dexterity can change from day to day. So having a different variety of sizes in hand sewn needles can make hand sewing much easier, and it prevents frustration. Very important. You okay there, Luna? I don't know if you can hear snoring. Talking of maintenance too, my friends, be sure to look after one very important tool of your trade. Your hands. Make sure that you are moisturising your hands frequently, because crafters that use their hands can find that their hands get incredibly dry. And something that I love to wear as well while I'm creating are some wrist warmers to keep my hands lovely and warm. And yes, you've guessed it, I've got a tutorial how to knit your very own wrist warmers right here on the channel. I'll pop a card above and a link in the description box, my friends. When it comes to sewing projects, my friends, I like to have a plan, and I have a little mantra too: good, better and best. Let's check out an example of that little mantra. A good sewing project could be something as simple as one of these: a gathered skirt, which is technically just 2 rectangles. And yes, I have a tutorial for these too, a card above and a link in the description box. A better option here might be a self-drafted dress, just like this anniversary dress I created right here on the channel. And a best option here could be a much more advanced pattern, just like this. The Liz dress by Charm Patterns. Having a plan where I have a good, better and best options like this, my friends, means that I don't get downhearted if my health for any reason means that I can't get to that best standard. Instead, I'll make something and still feel like I've created and achieved something, like a gathered skirt. Having a range of projects like this on the go at once also means, my friends, that if I am having a more difficult health day, I can still access creativity. Creativity, like sewing, is so important to me because it gives me a tangible result and makes me feel as though I am achieving something. This good, better and best mantra can also apply to single projects, my friends. For example, think about if you were creating a pair of shorts. Good could be a simple dartless pair with a basic waistband and a Velcro fastening. Better, you could add some darts and possibly even think about buttonholes. What about best? Yes, add those pockets. I'm just a little bit obsessed with pockets, but hopefully you get the idea of this good, better and best mantra, my friends. I also tend to keep things in 10 to 15 minute slots. This means that my hands and my mind won't find things too difficult and that I'm not overdoing things. And having 10 to 15 minute time slots also means I don't get bored, which I do very easily. Hopefully some of these tips help. Fingers crossed. Don't be afraid to experiment, my friends. There are so many different ways to do absolutely anything when it comes to sewing and creating. Make sure that you stick to the best method for you. And if you think about it, just take patterns for example. You can get sewing patterns in so many different ways now. You can do PDFs printed at home, you can get the old-fashioned tissue paper patterns. Even thinking about the printed version, my friends, you can go for AO size or tiled and stick them together yourself. You can even use a projector. Yes, moral of the story here, my friends, do what's best for you. The most important thing is that you're enjoying your creative process. Having a range of sewing scissors, my friends, in a range of different sizes and weights can also really help me when it comes to cutting out fabrics and patterns. one of my very, very favourite ways to get creative, knitting. So grab yourself a cuppa, my friends, as I take you through some of my favourite ways to access knitting. Have you got that cuppa? Let's go. Although I have been knitting since childhood, my friends, it's only very recently in the last few years that I've graduated from doing simple rows of stockinette scarves to making things like jumpers and full garments. And I've created some right here on the channel. I'll put the link to the playlist in the description box, my friends. But I've found, particularly recently, that knitting really helps my mental health. It really helps to calm my anxiety and stimming, and it's also great for helping with my ataxia and my dexterity, so I definitely recommend giving knitting a go. Now, it's the same case as it is with sewing. Knitting also has its own tools and supplies, so let's get chatting about how I access those and some top tips too. Let's go. So my friends, let's talk yarn. In sewing, you have your fabric. In knitting, you have your yarn. So just like with sewing, there are so many different kinds of fabric. With knitting, there are lots of different types of yarns. There are different weights and also different compositions in terms of the fibres. My top tips here, my friends: get to know your yarn. Get to a knitting or fabric supplies shop. Get to feeling the yarn, find out what fibres you like, find out which fibres you don't, and find out which types of yarn and which weights you find easiest to knit with. Just like with sewing, my friends, knitting also includes many different methodologies and many different tools too. So here I've got some knitting needles, and these are pairs of straight needles, and as you can see, we have them made in lots of different materials. So we've got some plastic needles here, some wooden needles, and also some metal needles, and as you can see, they're in lots of different sizes. So the most important thing here, my friends, is find out which needles your hands are happy to use, because especially for me myself, my dexterity can mean that sometimes I find it easier to use smaller needles and sometimes I find it easier to use bigger needles. So yes, once again, I like to have a variety of projects on the go so that if I fancy doing a little bit of knitting, my dexterity doesn't stop me in my tracks. Definitely a very important tip there, my friends. As well as straight needles like these ones, my friends, you can also knit using circular needles. I'm probably preaching to the choir here, but circular needles are a really new discovery for me, and I have to tell you, my friends, I love them. I am sold. These circular needles here, I absolutely adore them. I find them really easy to use, and I find it easier to get the stitches along these cables much easier than I do on a pair of straight needles like these ones. So definitely give both types of needles a go and see which are best for you. And remember, creativity should work for you. You shouldn't have to adapt yourself. So be sure to remember that, my friends. You do you. Just like I do with my sewing, my friends, I also apply my good, better and best mantra here to my knitting. I like to have a variety of knitting projects on the go, so that if I decide I fancy to do a little bit of knitting, then I don't need to worry too much about whether I'm able to do a more complex project or a simpler project on that particular day. In terms of good or simpler projects, I love to create things like this. This knitted beret, the pattern for which I created and is available right here on the channel. And And for a better or best project, I can knit anything right up to a sweater, like this gorgeous Claire jumper that, yes, you guessed it, you can get right here on the channel too, my friends. And having a variety of projects on the go to different ability levels really helps me to prevent getting bored and frustrated, and also helps me to keep being creative no matter how I'm feeling. So my friends, you've had a look at different yarns and different needles, and you've found out which of which you prefer using, but you found a pattern that uses neither, and you're a bit stumped. Do not despair, my friends, because there are hundreds of tutorials right here on YouTube that show you how to adapt knitting patterns. And although my knitting skills aren't quite up to par to be able to show you how to do that yet, my friends, trust me, someone out there right here on YouTube will be able to show you how to adapt that pattern so that you can use your favourite yarn and your favourite needles to create it. Let's adapt our creativity to fit us rather than the other way around. Broken record time, my friends. How many times have I said that in the last few weeks? Well, it's important. And talking of adapting patterns, my friends, this book is an incredible one to show you how to do just that, and has a lot of tips in it too, particularly for those of us who love vintage style knitting. Be sure to check out your local library, my friends. This is an indispensable resource right at your fingertips. And talking of resources, be sure to check out my knitting video where I discuss lots more of those besides. There's a card above. Finally, my friends, what if knitting is just not the creative pursuit for you? Well, I have a little idea for you, my friends. How about creating with pre-knitted fabrics? Now, this is a relatively new discovery for me, my friends, because up until about a year and a half ago, I never created using pre-knitted fabrics, but I have to tell you, I'm a little bit obsessed with doing it now. In fact, I'm wearing one of those creations right here, right now. This cardigan is actually created using pre-knitted fabric, and it's one of my ultimate favourite makes, and it's incredibly easy to draft and make too. I'll pop a card above and a link in the description box. And what about something a little bit more difficult? Well, I created my gorgeous winter pin-up jumpsuit using knitted fabrics too. Yes, there'll be a link in the description box, my friends. So even if knitting the fabric yourself isn't something you're feeling that is quite you, you can still create knitted creations of your very, very own. So my friends, there we go, a couple of my top tips on how I make sewing more accessible for me. Have you got any top tips you'd like to share? If you have, please do not hesitate to pop them in the comments below. But until next week, I hope you're having a great creative day no matter what you're doing. You take care, my friends. Bye. Still sleeping, Luna?